Hello folks and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to rank Angelwitch full discography. Angelwitch was part of the new wave of British heavy metal, but after their successful self-titled debut album, the band struggled to keep the lineup intact, so it took them 5 years to get their second album out. And after their two mid-80s albums, there hasn't been much material besides a few demos up until 2012's comeback album, As Above, So Below. And Angelwitch has been more or less a one-man project by Kevin Heybournes. And before we get into the rank of their albums, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more new wave of British heavy metal related videos. And now it's time to rank Angelwitch full discography from the worst to the best, so let's do this. In 5th place we have Frontal Assault from 1986, and even if I rank this as the worst Angelwitch album, I still think it's a competent record, definitely above average material here. The title track Frontal Assault is amazing and definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of the band, or that legendary first record of theirs. And by 1986, the new wave of British heavy metal wave had died out, but Angelwitch released this record, which seemed to be their last, because it took them another 26 years to release another album. And Angelwitch is one of my favorite new wave of British heavy metal bands, because they had this dark and mysterious sound, and they sung about witches and gorgons and stuff like that. And if you go back and listen to their late 70s demos, you can clearly see how influential this band was, not only for the whole new wave of British heavy metal, but also for the upcoming black and thrash metal genres that took hold towards the mid-80s. And people often praise Angelwitch's first album and the material that came out around 1980. But 6 years later things were a bit different for Angelwitch, and we can call this the Killerwatt era of the band, since they were signed to that label at the time when they released Screamin and Bleedin and Frontal Assault. And it looked like the band was done after just one record, but Kevin Heybournes put together a new lineup around 1984. Drummer Dave Hogg was still in the band on Screamin and Bleedin, but by the time that Frontal Assault came out, only Kevin Heybournes were left of the original trio. So this was practically a new band, even if Kevin Heybournes more or less is a one-man band. During the Killerwatt era, Kevin was no longer the band's main vocalist. Instead it's Dave Tatum that sings on this record. And Dave has this thick British accent, and I think he does a great job on this record. Frontal Assault is a solid heavy metal album, even if it might lack a bit of that speed and darkness of their debut album. But I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this record. And I've seen the reviews being a bit all over the place for Frontal Assault, and maybe this wasn't what the fans expected after that glorious debut album, that the band would struggle to keep a stable lineup, and that the band's sound would regress a bit instead of further developing. There are also a few hints of that melodic hard rock sound here that became so popular during the mid-80s, but it's not like the band did a complete U-turn or something. And I think that Frontal Assault is a fine record, but when you compare it to some of the other releases from 1986, it was clear that they were caught in no man's land here, between the dying new wave of British heavy metal scene and the emerging extreme metal scenes. And I also want to point out that I prefer the original artwork here over the art that they used for the American release. Next. In 4th place we have Angel of Light from 2019. And this is their latest release. And when Angelwitch released a new album, it's certainly one of the highlights from that year. And there are a couple of nods on this album towards their legendary self-titled album, Angel of Light, instead of Angel of Death, and the album art is in a similar style as well. The music here is pretty much in the traditional Angelwitch vein, not that far away from what they did on their last record, As Above, So Below. And I really do like some of the songs here, like Don't Turn Your Back, Condemned, or the Sabbath-esque The Night Is Calling. Angel of Light is a great album with a crisp production. This is certainly metal done the right way. Next. In 3rd place we have Screamin and Bleedin from 1985. And this was the also anticipated album that came out a bit too late, 5 years after that legendary debut album. And all the lineup changes, and the fact that they brought in a new vocalist in Dave Tatum, and a new bassist in Pete Cordelier. And it didn't help that the new wave of British heavy metal was practically over when this album came out in September of 1985. Angelwitch sounds a bit different during the Killerwatt era, and it's kinda hard to put a finger on exactly why they sound different, besides the lineup changes. Screamin and Bleedin is perhaps a bit more formulaic and not as atmospheric and dark as their debut. And I wanna throw in the word commercial here, because there are minor elements of a more commercial sound, since this is a fairly melodic album with those sing-along choruses and all. And I also think that the production here is functional but not great. And even if Screamin and Bleedin had a different tone to it, I still think it's a great record. Take the song Evil Games for example. That one could have been a big hit for the band, with that backup choir of kids that shouted Evil Games. Screamin and Bleedin did perhaps not live up to everyone's expectations when it came out, because this should have been the album that took the band up on that top shelf alongside Maiden and Saxon, but instead it all went away after the release of their next album, Frontal Assault. Next. In second place we have As Above, So Below from 2012, and as I briefly mentioned earlier, this album came out after 26 years of silence. Well, we had some compilation albums, that Resurrection demo, and some live albums and stuff like that, but this was the first time that the band had a proper album out in ages. I was really looking forward to this album when it came out, since I'm a big fan of pretty much everything that they've done. And they certainly didn't disappoint, not at all, because As Above So Below was a triumphant return. From the first moment when you turn on Dead Sea Scrolls, which is the first track here, it's like we're back in the 80s again. I mean, sure, you can still hear that the album came out in 2012 because of the production and all, but damn, this is such a cool record. And there has been a few years since I listened to this album, but I'm glad that I returned to it, since it's even better than what I remembered it to be. Plus Kevin Heybournes is doing all the vocals again, which I do prefer. And there are so many great songs here. Dead Sea Scrolls, Gubura, The Horla, The Guillotine, they are all great. And they even have a track here called Witching Hour, which is not a Venom cover, but it's cool that they can take something from Venom, because Venom borrowed heavily from Angelwitch back in the day. At least I'm of that conviction. As Above So Below might just be the best metal album of 2012, at least out of those that I can think of right now. Manowar, Testament, Accept, etc. And I also think that Kevin Heybournes and this completely new lineup managed to create an album that sounds more in the vein of their self-titled album than the Killerwatt releases from the mid-80s. So this was a strong comeback. A modern masterpiece? Maybe. Next. And the number one Angelwitch album is of course their self-titled debut. This album is often hailed as one of the best albums to come out of the new wave of British heavy metal era. I, for example, listen more to this record than more or less all combined Iron Maiden albums, or Saxon albums for that matter. Yeah, it's really that good. This has been one of my favorite albums for decades, and I never grew tired of it. It's just the perfect mix of everything that I like about metal. Great lyricism about sorcerers and witches, the mysterious album art, those evil sounding riffs, but also a sense of melody that later 80s bands often lacked. And I haven't even mentioned Kevin Heybournes' guitar play. It's melodic, melancholic, sometimes dark and creepy, and he's also a great vocalist. For me, this is just one of the absolute best metal albums of all time. And there's a lot of great songs here as well. Angelwitch is an amazing song, but also Atlantis, White Witch, Gorgon and Angel of Death are all masterpieces. I mean, Angel of Death was so dark and sinister for being released as early as in 1980. It predates Venom's debut Welcome to Hell with a full year, and it's the darkest and most evil sounding song that I've heard from 1980. So, let's bring up my full rank then. And I love more or less everything that they put out, even Frontal Assault that I ranked as the worst. And don't forget to check out all those early recordings from the band that I didn't mention here. The Sweet Danger EP, the singles that were released around the same time, and of course that 1978 demo. If Angelwitch would have released those songs on an album in 1978, it would have been a complete game changer. And we would probably be speaking more about Angelwitch these days, because Angelwitch was years ahead of the pack. I think that metal as we know it has its roots not only in the usual suspects like Black Sabbath, Priest and Motorhead, and later in Venom, Maiden and Metallica, but also in the early material of Angelwitch. And I really do think that they should be up there amongst the greats. And I've certainly noticed a bigger interest in more recent years for Angelwitch music. A lot of the musicians that shaped metal in the 80s looked towards Angelwitch for inspiration. Bands like Celtic Frost, Megadeth, Exodus, Death and Onslaught have all praised Angelwitch or even covered them. And now I'm of course curious to see if we have any Angelwitch fans here, and if so, feel free to rank their discography down below, and leave a like and a comment so that the algorithm gods will treat this video favorably, and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. And if you want to go the extra mile to support my work, then you can become a Patreon. It's only $3 per month and you get an invite to my Discord server, so that you can vote on future videos. Or you can always grab a shirt at the Ruthless metal store. It's all linked down below. And I'm also on Facebook and Spotify, so check those out as well. And that's all for now, so thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.